Ed Vaizey, can we just establish something? Is the government claiming that if we leave the EU by 2030, each household will be £4,300 worse off?
The government's saying that the growth of the UK economy would be lower if we left the European Union. It would be lower by some 6%, and that equates to around £4,000 per household. If you take that overall loss to the UK economy and divide it between the current households in the UK, and I know you have an issue with that, and indeed the BBC Reality Check, which I checked, which is a very good source to check things, you know, has a reality. But I think it brings alive a figure, which is £36 billion.
But let me just. But are you claiming? But are you claiming that households will be £4,300 worse off?
I couldn't have been clearer in saying that we say that the economy would contract by around 6%. That's around £36 billion that we will not grow, and that equates to £4,300 per household. That can be a loss of household income, but a loss of jobs.
But you're not mentioning. You're not measuring household income in this equation.
But we are.
You're measuring GDP per household. You're not measuring household income.
It's very clear in the document which Kate's brought with her that it's equivalent to £4,300.
But the two.
You've made it clear. I listened when George Osborne launched his document. I listened to Carmel Ahmed, the great BBC business editor, on the
but he's not
explaining
here.
Using the word
equivalent. But the two things are not the same. There are 27 million households in Britain at the moment. Our GDP is 1.8 trillion. If I do the same calculation as the Treasury, that gives me a household per GDP of 67,000. Average household incomes, which measure people's living standards, are £44,000. They're two entirely different things.
Well, I think there are lots of figures now that may be confusing the issue. The key point is that on any scenario you take of our position outside of the European Union, Britain will grow less slowly and be poorer. And it's not just the Treasury saying that. There are lots of other surveys that say that.
But I'm trying to work out. But you're claiming people will be worse off.
Survey of the likely growth scenarios for the UK economy show that we would be poorer if we left the European Union.
If you want to talk about that. No, hold on. I'm not going to let you try and talk your way out of something.
I'm going to try.
No, well, you're not going to succeed. Because if you wanted to measure whether households would be worse off or better off, you should use average household income. And you didn't. Why not?
Because we talked about GDP. We measured GDP and we're making a prediction. The Treasury, rather, is making an estimate. It's across three scenarios. There's actually a worst case scenario.
No, I understand that. But why did you not use the proper measure, which is household income?
Well, that's your assertion that it's a problem.
All right. Well, if it's my assertion, can you tell me any other project? No, hold on.
I've made the point.
Can you tell me any other project? Tell me any other project or the Treasury Red Paper where they use this metric of GDP per household.
Well, the LSE independent report, which came out in March, which had the same criticism from the BBC Reality Check, it's perfectly, you know.
No, I didn't ask you about the LSE. I asked you, has the Treasury ever used this before?
It said that GDP will contract by X. That is equivalent to per household. It's a figure.
But why has the Treasury not used this before?
Relate to. I'm sure the Treasury has used it before.
Well, I looked in the Red Book.
I haven't gone through. It may not be in the Red Book.
The OBR hasn't used it.
It may well have been used in terms of Treasury analysis during the Scottish referendum. It may have been used.
Well, it
Treasury analysis when it's looking at other policies.
Let me ask you this.
The point is, it's very clear what that document says. That's why Kate has it in front of her, so we can cross-check it.
I'm trying to work out where it's clear. Let me ask you this question. No. I'm asking the question.
Okay,
I'm
not allowed to
answer your own questions.
Okay. No, I just want to make some points.
I want to ask this question. If you think that GDP per household is such an important metric, why did you take our projected GDP in 2030 and divide it by the number of households today, not the number of households projected for 2030?
Well, because we're not saying it's we're saying it's equivalent to the households today. It's a figure that brings it alive. But the fundamental point...
No, you have to divide by the number of households in 2030.
You asked me to look at different surveys and how they are calculated. Can you point to any survey, any economic analysis, independent economic analysis, that says that the UK would be better off if we left the European Union?
And can we come back? Can we come back to my question?
The fundamental point is that on a range of measures, and the Treasury's taken a mid-range measure of a mid-range scenario. It's not taken, it could have, if it really wanted to frighten horses, it could have taken the WTO scenario.
Yes, no, I understand that. But can I please come back to try and get some clarity on this?
And it could have taken the most extreme
Let me try to come back and get some clarity. If you're trying to measure GDP per household in 2030, which, as I've suggested, is a dubious metric in the first place, but if you're trying to do that, why did you use the number of households now, which is 27 million, not the official prediction for households of 31 million?
Well, that's a question you can put to the Treasury people that put this together. But the point I'm trying to make is that every analysis...
Doesn't that sound strange?
Every analysis of our position, whether if we leave the EU...
Yeah, you've made that.
...is that we will grow less quickly than if we stay in the EU. It's going to cost us... as citizens of the UK, it's
that's your claim, but when it gets to the detail, it's quite difficult.
And we are better off in the EU.
Let me ask you one final thing on this. You use the number of households now, 27 million, but to get to the GDP for 2030, you assume a huge rise in immigration, which must mean there will be a lot more households. Why do you do that? Why do you assume that you will break your immigration target in every year for the next 15 years?
Well, immigration is one of the key issues that we debate constantly, but there will be...
so why do you break it?
There'll be a lot of European people coming to live in this country, and there are lots of Brits moving out to live in Europe.
Assume that immigration will increase. You assume that
there are more than 1 million Britons now living
I understand all that,
Union.
but you have an immigration target of 100,000.
There are 500,000 Irish people living in the UK.
We know the number of
welcome.
Irish people. That's not the issue. Your government's target is to get net migration down to 100,000. Your projections assume it rises by at least 150,000, 185,000 every year to 2030. Why?
Well, we've set ourselves very stretching targets, but this is an economic analysis based on the current scenarios of if we leave...
So you are going to break your immigration targets?
If we leave the European Union...
So you'll break your immigration targets?
...to the UK. We haven't succeeded in meeting our immigration targets.
And you intend to break them every year for the next 50 years?
By having a tough immigration target, we have reduced the amount of net migration. And as you know, a lot of the people who come to this country are actually students who come to study at our world-class universities.
That's the argument, because you've included them in your 100,000 net.